good morning, everybody. We are back one more time with Duality. We are streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. And I am here once again with two gentlemen who have become stalwarts in this project. The first, of course, is Roger Hanson of Roger Hanson Live. Hey, Roger, how are you today?
I'm doing all right, just trying to keep up.
Yes, that can be a challenge some days. And we also have Rushofwaves, who has been with us a couple of times now. Hey, Rush, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Awesome. And today is episode 8. And we are looking back at the previous 7 episodes and trying to get some sense of where we've been and possibly where we're going with this series. And so let's just jump straight into it. We started off in episode 1 looking at masculinity, the great vertical axis that we have that, shall we say, supports all other types of dualities. And I remember specifically choosing that to try and talk about how love is the defining characteristic of masculinity, and how so many of our ideas around God and spirituality and honor and rectitude all come back to these ideas of a type of masculine energy that underpins everything that we see in the world. But you saw it a little bit differently from me, didn't you, Roger?
Yeah, I with love, I see both the male and feminine aspects, just like I do with everything. Like everything all over the world has a male or a feminine and masculine aspect, and also. I mentioned in the first episode, and I still agree with it even after all these episodes, that the worst mistake that we did was we connected the feminine and the masculine aspects of everything to gender. You know what I mean? I think that was one of the biggest mistakes we had. It actually caused a lot of controversy for me, just talking about the subject, if I remember correctly. So
yes, I remember you saying that, Roger, and how many people misunderstood this idea of the masculine and the feminine being joined.
Well, I don't think they misunderstood. I think that they are doing exactly what I think the mistake was, is connecting these two aspects to gender. You know what I mean?
Right.
The male is the masculine, the female is the feminine, when the truth behind it all is we both have male or masculine, which I have a tendency of saying that male for masculine, feminine for female, and everybody does it. I even have to catch myself, like I just now did, and I did it in the last episode, I think, too. But we all do that, you know what I mean? And that's a big mistake, because that's in everything, and both males and females have both aspects.
Yes.
So I don't think they misunderstood. I just think they were doing the same thing that most people do. They connect it. They connect the two things, you know what I mean? To feminine and masculine to gender. Like, you know. So.
Yeah. What do you think, Rush? What's your opinion? How do you interpret masculinity and femininity?
Well, I think that that's a great start, is that gender may not really have anything to do with masculine and feminine,
Yeah.
other than maybe a propensity towards it or a greater than or less than, or, less than aspect. But yeah, I was actually kind of wondering, is there duality in love? And I know we talked on our episode of Dub Waves about love, and I brought up love and hate and neglect. I'm wondering if love's counterpart or its duality is neglect. So, or is it? I don't know.
It's fascinating,
duality.
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'm wondering if maybe some things in life don't have duality. They are a specific thing. So if you were to have some, a duality, one of those dualities sometimes doesn't split again into another duality, so it's therefore without duality.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. It is fascinating. I also wonder about what the opposite of love is, or the other pole of love is. When we did the second episode, which was on femininity, I suggested that the opposite of love was balance, and that for love to achieve its potential, it needs to be held in this feminine atmosphere of balance and striving for what would you call it? Acceptance, maybe? Because love in itself is sort of, can you say, amoral? It's beyond a feeling. That's another thing that we've discussed in our podcasts, Rush, is that love isn't a feeling as much as it's an action, something that you do. And so for me, it was seeing that men and male energy is much more about going out there, changing the world, making changes, imposing your will on nature, rising above challenges and things like that, in this way in which people, men particularly, but not just men, but do these things for the greater good of the community. What do you think, Roger?
Well, when we first started, I had a rough time really wrapping my head around the whole masculine, feminine, feminine aspects, and then duality versus dualism. And the thing is like after doing these shows, it started actually making more sense to me. For me, I believe that the duality in love is hate. That's what I was taught.
Right.
And the thing about it is I was also taught that two opposites can't occupy the same space. And then, Rush even mentioned it. Well, when you say space, what are you talking about? Define space. Is it the exact same space, or is it like a battery, how it has different compartments with it? Now, if you take the head and the mind, there's different parts of the mind. So hate and love could be in the same brain, but are you talking about the same exact space? So with that, I'm saying in the same exact space, like the same exact thought, at that moment.
Yes.
So you can't experience hate and love at that exact moment at the same time. You see,
that's quite interesting. In Buddhism, they also have that idea that each tiny individual thing arises separately from the other things, and then they sort of almost flash in and out between the two, so it looks as if things are occurring at the same time, but in fact they're not. There's this back and forth between different ideas. Yeah. It is interesting. What do you think, Rush? That was something that you did say.
Yeah, I was kind of really leaning for a lot of people use terminology such as love, hate, relationship, and whatnot. So I can grasp love and hate coexisting in the same space at one time. And then kind of like what I was going over before was that my possible duality of that is neglect.
Mm-hmm.
In the absence of love and hate, or hate. And
Yes.
yeah. And how interesting the feminine you're attributing to balance. I find that pretty interesting thought. Yeah, am I covering that correctly?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
What did you specifically ask me?
Oh, yeah, I think that I was. I think that I agree with you about one of the things that you said that was really interesting, Roger, that you said, I think, in the third episode, or was it when we were speaking about Zoroastrianism? You were talking about how the opposite of good. What were you saying? The opposite of good is the lack of good. The opposite of good is the absence of good.
It's bad or evil, good or
Right.
evil. And then we found out too, like they are both in duality and dualism, but
Yes.
there was a strange, good and evil and duality, they don't conflict with one another, but in dualism they conflict.
They conflict, yes.
They're conflicting.
I think that I'm seeing this in what Rush is talking about with neglect. I've heard that called indifference before, is that the opposite of love isn't hatred. The opposite of love is indifference, which I think is what you're calling neglect, Rush. And I see that. I really do see how with love and hate, they are forces that you can feed and that will grow. But indifference is just like a sort of an empty nothingness, a void almost. And so it's quite interesting to see these forces of nature, love and hate, compared to the sort of indifference of death, maybe, of nothingness. Yeah, so I don't exactly know that I was asking anything, just sort of commenting that it is quite a profound and deep and difficult concept.
Yeah, it's definitely thought-provoking subject. I can see why you guys mentioned you're getting some comments in the beginning. And,
yeah. It was pretty and the thing about it is we weren't like even bringing up the idea of gender whatsoever. It was a conversation just like this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
it
kind of got it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me too, looking at this from a woman's point of view and seeing how I feel that I don't need to do masculine things. Like, I don't know where that's coming from or why I've got that feeling or what it's attached to. But I do have this idea somewhere in the back of my mind that I'm becoming aware of through doing this series, is that, but I'm a girl. Why should I do those things? You know, shouldn't men take care of that stuff? And it's really interesting to see how that I've attached that to gender, you know, and almost given myself a pass in some things. Is it like, do you find that for you, Roger, in what you were saying about the name calling and the comments, that people or the men that you were talking to were saying that you shouldn't do woman things? Is there that separation?
I think what it really came down to, it wasn't the fact that it was doing women things. What it was is it was the heated political environment that's going on right now. You know,
Right.
like everybody's talking about freaking gender roles and freaking, you know, unisex bathrooms and stuff like that. So that really hit a nerve with them because they heard masculine and feminine, and like even on Rumble, you get on Rumble and these guys are just talking about the stuff, but they keep connecting it to gender. You know what I mean? And it's, from everything I've learned about it, they're way off. It has absolutely, well, I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I guess it does have to do with gender in some way, but that's not what it's all about, you know? And just the average person doesn't have an understanding of that. That when you start talking that conversation, the first thing they think of is male, female, and apparently all the heated arguments and conversations involving politics and you know, stuff like that. So it got pretty out of hand real quick.
Something that we haven't mentioned before is this duality and dualism in politics, and how the Democrat side can be seen as the feminine side of politics, and the Republican side can be seen as the masculine side of politics. That is a huge complication that we have at the moment in trying to have these conversations, is that there are so many of these concepts that are linked in our subconscious minds. And so doing things like coming into a public forum like this and talking about things is very, very tricky, because there is so much, like you said, there's so much hurt and mistrust between people. I think that one of the things that came across to me very early in those first 2 episodes that we did was how, with good and evil, there is this idea of conflict, and that you want good to win or to be more important or to somehow triumph. Whereas the idea with masculinity and femininity is more that it's a consensual, cooperative dance between things that appear to be opposite, but in fact aren't opposite, they're complementary. Do you see that, Rush? Do you see the complementary nature of these dualities?
Yes, actually, I'd love to speak on that. I have a mom that spent many years in the corporate world and in business and very political industry, in the auto industry. And she, growing up, had to learn very early, before being a teenager, how to take care of the family and do things and make choices. And she has this very masculine, very strong will to, coercive nature about her. You know, when she says something, to do something, you don't question it. She says it in such a confident way. She's not asking. And so, I don't know, just having a mom like that, it allowed me to see that masculinity isn't just in a physical sense, but in a mental sense, and in the way that we do things. And, you know, she didn't have to be a big, strong brute to get to stand behind her convictions, although she was a part of a giant corporation with many other men and the law and behind her. So there is a definite aspect of masculinity that stood behind her and allowed her to stand with such conviction and get things done and she didn't have to, go to fisticuffs to straighten people out when they didn't want to listen to her. So I'm not sure if there is masculinity without the physical, not threat, but just the physical strength of something to bend something into your will. So like femininity, it can say all it wants. If something masculine doesn't want to, it's not going to. But if a bigger masculinity comes along and says to do something, you might not question it. So what I'm saying is that even though she does exude masculine traits mentally, she would have never been able to do those things in a personal way as successful as she did in the business world, with a giant corporation standing behind her as she made choices. So there's this definite different aspects of the masculinity, and I would imagine different aspects of the femininity. I liked your view at femininity. Being a part of femininity is balance. That strikes me as maybe a pretty solid truth there. So yeah, I think masculine and feminine resides in everything that has potential to have a dualistic nature. If it's some object that doesn't have, it's just a thing or a concept, you may not be able to extract masculine and feminine out of something that has only singularity to it. But exploring things that can be divided with our understanding and our language and definition to become have a duality in its nature, it certainly is. It's a complex dance, I think. I mean, I don't want to go too much further. I might get lost in my own words.
It's tricky, isn't it? Yes, it really is tricky. I think that that's quite an important thing that we should dwell on a little bit here is the thing that you guys have both mentioned, that I think that what we're talking about here, what we need to remember that we're focusing on, is that we're really talking about some sort of spiritual or mental way of being in the world, and not so much the physical things of what a girl looks like or what a guy looks like, or gender, or these child raising and these physical things. We are definitely focusing in here on the spiritual elements, aren't we, Roger?
Yeah, I think that's what really isn't focused on enough, And don't get me wrong, a lot of the stuff does have to do with those topics that you were mentioning, but like the general public doesn't really discuss the fact that it is a spiritual thing, and like there's aspects, you know what I mean? Like whenever I was listening to Rush, the thing that popped out to me too was the fact that, his mother was a single mom, which kind of forced her into a situation where she had to have both the feminine and the masculine aspects in her come out, you know what I mean? So that right there stuck out to me too. But most people have to be forced into that situation by what's going on around them, that's the way it was with me with sobering up and talking, even learning about this stuff. I didn't say one day, I'm going to learn about duality,
Sure.
That just seems so cool, you know what I mean? I had to hit rock bottom in order to become desperate to where I wanted to, something better for myself, because I knew the only direction I was going to go towards was death. So I had to change. And like when it comes to that duality, I had to learn. I had to actually do actions. And it's easy to take the feminine aspects and fall on that because we all do it. And I understand what Rush is saying about that. But the masculine stuff is hard. The masculine stuff has to do with duties and responsibilities. Like the masculine aspect of love is when a father or mother gets up in the morning and they go to work so that they can put money in their pockets and feed their children.
Yes.
You see, that's the masculine aspect of it. And it not just men have to do that, women have to do that, and that has to do with who we become and who we are, and it defines us. So that would be in both physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, all those parts of our life, and not just that, but socially too, in a social aspect. I mean, it's amazing how all that works. And like I said, I've learned so much from just doing these episodes with you, us getting together, doing them. I thought I understood this somewhat, but come to find out, I've learned more while we've been doing this stream than when we first started.
Me too. Isn't it amazing? Yes.
Yeah, it is. It really is. We've talked about everything from Zoroastrianism to freaking bees.
Yes, with the bees, awesome. I've been thinking about the bees, but let's not jump ahead. Okay, let's stay.
I know. I'm just saying it's yes. Amazing. I mean, how much we've discussed.
We have. I know. Yes. So the next thing that we did discuss after the masculinity and femininity, and we looked at Zoroastrianism and good and evil. One of the things that we looked at in that was the good mind, which is this innate desire for us to reach for the highest ideals that we can. And that's quite interesting to me because that would imply a masculine energy, the reaching for the top. But the goodness needs to be balanced. You cannot just reach. You need to reach and achieve a sort of a unity and a balance between all the things that are going on around you. So after we looked at that, the good mind, I actually had a conversation with you, Rush, where we were talking about I think that you were telling me about the Akashic records, which is this store of all good energy. Do you think that the good mind is linked to the Akashic record in any way?
Well, the well-trained mind can definitely explore the Akashic records without the ego and personal aspect of ourselves getting in the way of understanding that. Interestingly, I had a really profound dream last night, and it was a recurring dream, and I wasn't waking up in between, but I would just enter the beginning of the dream again. And I think by the third time I realized that I was in the dream, and I started filling in the blanks, the things that I had questions about in the dream. I started filling in the blanks. Just, it seemed like it was just happening, and all the, it was just an automatic. My brain was filling in those spaces, and the dream started to take a different shape, and I started to realize that I was no longer in the Akashic field, but rather in my own ego and understanding of it. So the dreams sort of started to stop developing, and I just kept kind of going through what I had already sensed. Now, I'm not sure if there's a female or male aspect of it, but it's certainly a more real thing than our own version of understanding personally, in our experience as individuals alive now. because the Akashic record is this expanse of time and possibly a third person perspective of it. So a singularity can be derived out of an information field. So we might be using an aspect of ourself and our own third person viewpoint to explore the Akashic records. Now, like I said, somewhere in there, if you don't allow it to be and you're just as a witness, I think we have a tendency to start filling in the spaces and the story starts changing and you're not actually viewing the record anymore. You're viewing your opinion of it. And yeah. So it's definitely interesting to me. Sometimes I feel like I'm definitely in that space, and then as soon as I try and understand it or make sense of it, I'm quickly out of that space.
It's an interesting point you make about the well-trained mind. Roger, I think that you talk about that too when you talked about Zoroastrianism, was about the training that was necessary to achieve this sort of state of goodness. Am I right?
Yeah, with the Zoroastrianism, the Zoroastrians they discipline themselves a lot when it comes to the ideal mind is what they call it. It's Ahura Mazda creates the ideal world within his mind first, and that is the way they see it reflecting onto them. If Ahura Mazda creates the ideal world in his mind, then their thoughts would be on the ideal world as well. That's before it leaves the mind. So they have to discipline themselves to think that way and then understand that after it leaves their mind and it becomes a part of the material world, that's where the frustrations come from and the turmoils and the energies that are fighting against the ideal world, you know. So it's pretty interesting. And then we also discussed a little bit too of it, I think, in the second episode when I asked you about what was it? It was something that you and Otto always talk about. It's Dharma. The Dharma.
Oh yes, the Dharma. Yes, the cosmic law.
And I remember what you was telling me, and that was pretty disciplined too. It had like the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah, that's
the
right.
Eightfold Path.
The Eightfold Path. Yes, yes, very highly structured. Another interesting thing that Otto told me was that at the very beginning, when the Buddha started to train people in this path that he had, his mother-in-law came. His mother-in-law, his stepmother. Anyway, some older woman came to him and said, "Please train me as well." And he said, "No, this training is for male minds, not for female minds." And she begged him until he relented and gave in. And there was always this tradition of women who, among the Buddhists, who were interested in the training. And that goes again, Roger, to what you were saying, is that this masculinity and femininity is something that's universal to all of us, regardless of our gender. Just like a spiritual life is important to everybody, as well as overcoming that tendency to get into your ego that Rush was mentioning just now. Yeah.
Yep.
What do you see as the opposite of ego, Roger?
Well, I believe that there's it kind of splits up, and like I know a lot of people have an issue with alter egos, but I believe that is a part of it. But opposite of the ego, because ego actually starts in pride, okay, and I hear a lot of people say that pride is good to a certain extent. No, it really isn't, because even if you say that, and if you're a religious or spiritual person, you have to understand what humility is about. So when it comes to humility is giving credit to something else other than yourself. Okay, so when you do something good, you shouldn't take pride in it. You should give that credit to something else other than yourself, because that humbles you. It makes you humble and show you humility, you know. So every time you take that little piece of pride into you, it builds up and it builds up, and your ego builds up, and all of a sudden you have an alter ego. You have a part back in the back part of your brain that's saying, man, you know, you don't deserve that credit. You know that you really didn't do that. And all the time you're waiting for the shoe to drop. You're waiting for something to go wrong. And usually you cause something to go wrong because you're waiting for it.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I believe the opposite of it is humility.
Right. Yes. Rush, you have quite a good take on pride. I know that you said some things before about what is the right sort of appropriate sort of pride. Don't you?
Yeah, well, I think like Roger was saying, it's not, you don't want self-pride, but to make someone proud is not self-centered. And that kind of, if someone was to be proud of you or have pride in knowing you or something, that pride is outside of yourself. And that's okay to be in that kind of relationship with pride, I suppose, if we can, if that is the word that we should be using right now. But like I think I said in that episode, is make your dad proud. Is that if you're just, you do something good and you're proud of yourself, you don't care about anybody, that's could be, you know, ego based and possibly could cause a bit of disease in your field. Whereas if you're doing something to make someone else proud, then that could be a positive thing.
Yes.
So in that aspect, I guess the word pride or proud is not altogether an evil word to me, but if you're not looking outside yourself for the definition of that, or to gain that that feeling, I suppose, of, like I said, making someone proud of you or doing something, then it's not good. It's not a humble state, and you could, over time, be feeding your ego, and it could cause destruction in your life. Now, every once in a while, you're a kid and you do something real cool, and you're proud of yourself. You take pride in things. It's not a bad thing, but to be anchored to it for the next movement of your life, you might find yourself getting into trouble, because this interconnected, woven nature of our society and our relationships, it certainly is driven by, you know, making other people happy, making your family happy, doing good things for people and making them feel good. And, you know, if you happen to get the credit for it, you know, and you're somebody's friend, you're making them proud to be your friend. And in that aspect, I think it's okay.
Right. Yes. Yes. Okay. So we did those initial episodes, and then we came to the place where you joined us, Rush, and you joined us to talk to us about electricity. And the fascinating thing that I got from you in that episode was that electricity drives our cellular nature. I was wondering if you would be able to recap that a little bit for us, because that was a very fascinating step that we took in this whole exploration. You were explaining to us how all of life is driven by these differences, these differences in capacity between our cellular nature. Are you there, Rush? Hello, Rush?
So here, I'm having a little bit of a difficulty here. Hold on.
Okay. All right. So, Roger, that was quite an interesting episode, wasn't it? That one where Rush explained to us about electricity. What do you remember? What struck you particularly from that episode?
Well, it was the receptors in the brain that really stuck out to me. Like, I like to get into science and learning things, and like up in your brain, you have receptors where electricity travels between them to relay information and stuff like that. I remember we were getting into the electrostatic elements of it too, and things of that nature. And that's a lot of the good stuff I remembered.
Yeah, me too.
So.
Are you back, Rush?
Yeah, I'm here.
There it is.
That electromagnetic realm. Is that something?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, and it proves itself to create its own dualistic nature because the magnets repel each other, and electricity attracts. So it finds its way. So yeah, I think that's a really good definition or way to explore and study dualism in the world.
Yes.
And of course, the old here in the West believes we live in a electromagnetic universe, and that's pretty much the main thing that governs existence. It's fascinating to me to explore those things.
Yes, and really interesting. Perhaps a better way of being able to talk about things than in terms of masculinity and femininity, to be able to talk about things in terms of maybe positive poles and negative poles, but also problematic because, like, what is negative? Is negative actually negative, or is it just another way of speaking? It's a lot.
When we started getting into that too, there's another thing that happened to me. Like, I was having an issue with understanding the whole thing between dualism and duality, masculinity and femininity, femininity, the feminine.
Yes.
But I was having a hard time with that until we started talking about the electricity, and then after that, that's when Rush started talking about bees. And it's weird because, like, in the beginning, we were talking about nature and nature being male or masculine and feminine, and the masculine was the stuff that works behind the scenes. And it didn't start making sense until we started talking about actual nature, which that's what electricity really is, even though it runs through a house, Yes. But once we did that, things started making sense to me, and I found that interesting by itself. Like, that conversation actually helped me out. That's why I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, it was a brilliant that was interesting for me as well, because we were talking about the battery. I think that was the episode when we were talking about, can a negative and a positive exist in the same place? Or if there's a negative, can you replace it with a positive? And I think an interesting thing that came out of that talk was that a battery contains the negative and the positive in the same space, even though inside the battery it's sort of split so there can be a flow. And that's the same with people, is that we contain these opposites within our own body and within our own mind, and that things flow because these opposites are part of us. Yeah.
I like to use the term compartmentalization, and a lot of people have issues with it because when they hear the word compartmentalization, they think conspiracy theory, and a lot of people in conspiracy theory believe in that, and there's valid reasons for it too, but it's also the way that the human body and nature and everything works. I mean, we have this brain in our head and we compartmentalize things. We put it in little areas of our mind. This goes here, this goes here. It's like that Stephen King movie where the guy was sorting out information in his brain and he'd put it in filing cabinets. I forgot the name of it. It was a cool one about aliens and stuff. And,
Okay, cool.
It was a Stephen King book that he made into a movie, but one of the guys was able to do that. He was real good at it, and that's basically kind of what we do. We compartmentalize information within our brain. It's not in the same space. It's like in the battery. It's in those different areas. It's compartmentalized. It's separate from each other inside the battery.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And then when we talked about, that's so cool. You know, I'm just thinking about that as well while you're speaking, and I'm thinking that, do you know that the limbic system that sits between the two hemispheres of the brain is the structure that helps you communicate with each side of your brain? So you've got this very creative side of your brain, and you've got this very rational side of your brain. And the limbic system are all the wires, if you like, that go between those two. And in a man's brain, the limbic system is very minimalist, very sparse. And so there are a few very strong connections, and that's why men are so very good at keeping things separate, because a woman's limbic system is very dense and everything is connected between the two parts, which is why women get things bleeding into each other all the time. So it's interesting that the gender differences that we have, the physical gender differences, change our ability to manipulate the spiritual differences. Anyway, I think that's fascinating.
Yes. You're getting right into it. It's the power of a magnet to repel itself or attract a metal or something that's magnetic, is this very masculine quality. And I think men are more capable in their mind and physically to hold things apart or to mash them together. And so in our mind, we can keep these very separate. And
whoops. Okay, your volume's gone completely, Rush. Sorry, we can't hear you. Oh,
Hopefully he heard you, because that sounded like it was getting good. Maybe he'll remember.
Yeah. Oh, let's hope that he can jump back in. That was brilliant.
I'm starting to feel like I'm back on Jaffe's show again.
What in terms of the volume?
The volume and everything is always going off on there. So
really, are you back yet, Rush? No, we can't hear you.
Barely hear it.
We can't hear you at all. Okay, here he comes back again. Yeah. Are you back, Rush? You see that this is building suspense. We really want to hear what he has to say. Come back, Rush. It says that it's admitting him, but he's not appearing. Oh, goodness. Okay.
There he is.
Hello.
Hi.
Can we hear you? Hello, Rush?
It's that phone.
Oh, goodness me. The wind must be blowing. It's blown the signal away. Hello, Rush? Oh, this is such a pity. I mean, that was so exciting. What he was saying was so on the money.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Well, it was like what you were saying too, though. That was pretty good. I'm pretty sure you inspired him to say that. Yeah.
Are you back?
Am I back?
Okay,
Yeah.
we can hear you. Hello, are you there?
Okay. Yeah. Hi.
Okay, all right.
Where did you lose me?
Right
Oh,
at the
God.
beginning of what you were saying, Rush. You jumped
I
in and
was
said,
hoping you'd remember, because like that was getting good, and all of a sudden it just went bam. I'm like, oh man. Start over. You think you could say that again? Because it was really good what you were saying.
Yeah, saying how bobdub was mentioning how there's a difference masculine and feminine nature of our mind and our limbic system, and how men have a propensity, a natural strength to hold things apart physically and mentally, or push them together. And women have, like bobdub was saying, is this very meshing view of things and ability to balance and all of that. So they're not quite as strong energetically.
yeah,
But they do. I mean, they do have this magnetic aspect of them. I guess we're actually kind of. I guess I was kind of talking about masculine and feminine, and how the different, just natural strengths of a man using his electric nature to either force something together or keep it separate, and that compartmentalizing. I really love that word too, and that is sometimes a very male strength, to be able to put something in your mind and keep something separate from that and compartmentalize things so that you can look at them separately and understand them. And maybe they do have like a singular nature, but they do have a duality nature. So it's definitely a strength of a man. But like I was saying earlier, my mom was pretty good in a man's world, and she had the ability to do that and developed it very early on in life. But yeah, I find that fascinating what you're saying about the limbic system, and it really prompted me to say that. Yeah.
it is very interesting how men can hold apart or bring together. And I'm not saying only men, as you say, there are women who are very good at doing that. What an interesting thing about Jung's theories of development of men and women is that women develop a lot of relationship skills very early on in their life, whereas men develop a lot of achievement skills early in their life. And then when they get to around about 40 or 50 years old, they almost, you could say they were bored, if you like. They've done that. And the whole midlife crisis that comes about in our development is to resolve that successfully. We swap over to investigate the skills, the opposite sets of skills that we haven't. It sounds to me, from what you're saying about your mom, Rush, is that she very early in her life, much earlier than other women, started training herself to make that swap over, and so probably matured as a person at a much younger age, way before the classic midlife crisis, which is very interesting. I'm sure that men discover that too when they have children, that sort of crossover into the world of relationships.
Can I say something real quick about that though? Since I'm an older man, what a lot of people call midlife crisis is it really isn't a good explanation of it. Like it's really not a midlife crisis. Like when you hit late part of your 40s, I'd say, you go through this thing where you take a look at all of these things that you did that you thought were responsible and you thought were great, and you look back on them and you see how at that age that you're at, it was really pointless. Like there were things that you could have done. There's things you could have said. There's a life that you could have actually done that would have been something you enjoyed in life. But instead, you chose to go this path, and you really didn't want to go it. And that was one thing that happened to me. You know, I took a lot of stuff that I really wanted to do, and I put it over to the side because I thought I had to do this.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
And when I got into my 40s and now in my 50s, I'm better able to distinguish between what's important and what really isn't important. You know, it's important for me to spend the last part of my parents' life with them rather than out running around trying to freaking make it to the top of the hill. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because those are important things in my life now. Whereas when I was younger, I was running and gunning. It was all about me. I needed to take care of me and be the best I could be, you know?
Yes.
And it's not like that no more. And there just something happened in my brain that said, you know what? And to be honest, I couldn't clearly explain it. That's the best explanation I have for it. You know, but I really think that term isn't really used correctly when it comes to midlife crisis. Some people do go out and get the fancy cars, but that has to do with ego and vanity more than anything else, you know.
Well, that is important, Roger, because you can. Okay, so two things. One is that in psychology, crisis means turning point. So it's like you come to a crossroads. So it is also a stupid word and a complicated word. The other thing is that you can resolve that turning point in your middle life in the wrong way. You can resolve it by going into ego and doubling down on what you've already done and tried to do everything that you've done with knobs on. Or you can do what you said is like evaluate and see what's actually really important and go on that sort of less driven path, if you like. So I think that that's one of the things that I'm really loving about doing this show is that we are looking at some of these misunderstandings around these topics and trying to tease out what is the truth and what are the right words to use, how to express these concepts, because unless you have a firm understanding of what you're talking about, it's almost pointless to talk. Don't you think?
Yeah. And what I was saying there is basically going along with what you guys were saying. It's just I think other people really don't understand what's actually taking place there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's interesting.
What do you think, Rush? What's your opinion? Have you thought about sort of midlife turning points and success and choosing an alternative path?
Oh no.
Okay, we seem to have volume issues again. Well, Roger, we've gone through quite a lot of the things that we have covered in the previous episodes. Have we left anything out that we still need to remember and mention?
Yeah. Buoyancy and bees.
Buoyancy and bees. Excellent. Talk to us about buoyancy. I remember there's negative and positive buoyancy, isn't there?
Yeah. And there was one thing that you said that I think would be cool to hear again. When you compared weight in water determining if it sinks or floats. You said that you can relate that to life too, and different aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that.
I
You
don't
remember
remember exactly.
the weight of
From
a rock inside of water determines its buoyancy, or the object. Okay, like if the object's weight is heavier than the water, it gives it a negative buoyancy energy, and it'll sink. But if the weight of the object is lighter than the water, it gives it positive buoyancy, which
mm-hmm.
makes it float. And
Yes.
when I explained that, you said that that's kind of the way things are in life too, where you either sink or you float.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know what I mean? So
And that the water is your environment, and you create that sort of environment for yourself, because hard things do come along in life, and you can be driven down, and you can have that feeling of being overwhelmed and swamped and drowned. But you yourself can choose whether you want to be a positive or a negative person. It's one of the very strange lessons of duality, is that these things are not imposed upon us. We can choose who we want to be within the situation, and we can choose to sink or swim. Rush, are you back? Because I know that you have some strong feelings about that ability of us to choose, for us to choose. No, still not back. All right. So yes, I do think that buoyancy is more than just a physical thing, just like masculinity and femininity is more than just a physical thing. You can be a very buoyant person. You can choose to rise above your circumstances. And the weight of your trouble can still be huge. It can still
mhm.
be huge. Just because you choose doesn't make the problem any lighter. But what it does do is that there is a way of being in the world where there is less suffering. You bring yourself to a place where there is less suffering. In Buddhism, they say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And
Mhm.
suffering is a product of your mind and how you choose to look at your circumstances. So yeah, that's what I remember from that, Roger. Have I missed anything?
You hit it right on the dot. That was
Yes.
excellent. Like, you should be a college professor and stuff. I've got to give you kudos, man. It was like I was actually going to get up and start clapping and
No,
everything.
Roger, stop now. You're
But
making me shy.
you remember the graduate, wasn't it, where everybody stood up on the tables? Wasn't that the graduate? No, that the
Oh,
graduate was no, the graduate was with the. Never mind. Don't listen. The one where they stood up on the desks.
oh,
I
was that
forgot the
Dead
name of it.
Poets Society?
Dead Poets Society. Yeah. See,
Yes.
I was
Oh,
getting ready to
Captain, my
stand up on my
Captain. No.
yeah, I was getting ready to stand up on my desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain."
Roger, you are too sweet to me. What a sad thing that we have missed Rush. I know that the highlight of our show so far has been Rush's explanation of bumblebees, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. I'd rather if he can't come on and talk about it, I'd rather just wait until some other time and then
I
maybe
think
go over
so.
it.
I think so. It's he has such a good way of explaining it, and it really does. Yeah, I think we will just have to realize that it's not meant to be for today. And
Hmm.
perhaps we should just wrap up now, Roger, and clear the palate and get ready for next week.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So I think at this stage, I would just like to really thank those of you who have been following along with us. We know that there is a core of you who have been watching us, and we thank you for your attendance to the conversation. It's really awesome that you are interested. We think that it is something that, as a community, we can really get this word out there, and we can help people to achieve a higher level of life satisfaction by understanding some of these concepts that are so mixed up in mainstream at the moment. And yet we have this opportunity to just come over here and consider things at a quieter pace, you know, instead of being swept away by the world. So thank you very, very much. Also, thank you for your comments and your engagement. It really is great when you offer us things to think about, things that we can take forward next week. And if there is anybody out there who would like to be on the show, they have an interesting perspective, do hit us up in the comments below. You know, we're always interested in listening to alternate points of view. So you're very welcome. So I think that's my final for this little recap show. Roger, what do you have to say in ending off here?
There's no way of topping that, and it's done. I mean,
all right, we're done.
You're on a roll. You're on a roll.
Bless you. Thank you so much, Roger, for everything you've done to make this show a success. It's really fabulous working with you. And Rush, I'm sorry you're not still with us. I'm sorry the wind blew you away. But also, thank you for your enthusiasm and your commitment. It really has made the project awesome to have you on board. And I think I'd also just like to mention that we've also had support from Old John, who was with us on our first episode. Thank you, John, for everything that you've done towards making this awesome. And Do Better, who joined us to talk to us about connection and community. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week. We will be back again next week with some more scintillating discussion. So please feel free to join us then. Goodbye.